Did you have a person in your life that he had a strong emotional connection with someone else? Maybe in the relationship, maybe in the marriage, your husband had a strong connection to someone else that was an emotional connection that was starting to cause you pain and confusion because those emotional connections and lines and boundaries seem to get crossed into the realm of emotional affairs and what that actually looks like versus it just being a physical affair. But you start to see this connection that's pulling him away from you or pulling him away from just connection, period, because there's this other person involved. Maybe you're curious of like why narcissists even engage in emotional affairs and what they actually gain from them. Like if you're right here and they could easily come back to you, why are they connecting with other people? Why are they moving towards other people? What does this actually look like? Like when we talk through this aspect of affairs and emotional affairs, this is a hard part for some people to come to terms with because they struggle with the actual act of it. I've heard countless people that have said, I would have rather had my spouse or my husband cheat on me physically than I would have them cheat on me emotionally because it's a different type of pain. It's a different type of emotion. It's a different type of connection that has been lost and damaged in that relationship and oftentimes irreparable. Now, I'm coming from a frame and a perspective that I see it from the other side because that is who I've been. In the past, the relationships that I started as affairs were never started physically at first. They were typically started emotionally, connecting with other people in a way of saying like, oh, this person gets me. This person actually sees me who I actually am. This person like understands and feels my pain and all this stuff because I wanted to be the victim. I wanted the person that had someone look after me or take care of me or be a person that was giving me that attention, that supply, and I wasn't getting that everywhere else. So like it has to be this, like there's so many stories. But this emotional piece starts to build this connection. And building connection with someone really quick sometimes can be a high or sometimes can be like a thrill. Oftentimes with affairs in general, they're normally thrilling for narcissists, for toxic people, for cheaters in general. It's the high of getting away with it, the high of like being connected to someone, but they don't actually know who they are, like a ton of different things. For narcissists, emotional affairs provide a very extreme source of narcissistic supply. Now, the reason why is typically they're on the side, and typically they're hidden. Typically, there's something that they're already getting certain supply from other people, and the emotional supply is an addition or is the start of a physical affair down the road. Now, with physical affairs, unlike physical affairs, emotional connections oftentimes offer this constant validation of desirability, of charm, of influence over others. Like the attention, the admiration the narcissist receives in an emotional affair becomes this addictive piece, fueling the sense of the fragile self-worth. Now, narcissists do have fragile self-worth. They have this image that they've constructed being like, this is the good image, this is the perfect person that I am, but behind that is a fragile self-worth. Because who they actually are underneath, they don't like. So like, let me put up a mask. Let me put up another version of myself to appear good so I don't have to admit who I actually am. So think of it this way. You might have a narcissist in your life where he's been in a committed relationship for years, but he's also engaging in these emotional affairs. Oftentimes we see this with narcissists, emotional affairs with multiple women simultaneously. Like you discover his phone and you see that he's been texting multiple people, connecting with multiple people on so many different levels. Each emotional connection gives him a temporary high, a temporary like solace of like, oh, I'm getting attention. I'm getting admiration from these people. Boosts the ego, fills this emotional void. The problem is it'll never be filled. Like when someone is going through this cycle and they're going through this addictive type of piece, it'll never be filled by other people. It'll never be filled by other things. It'll never be filled by all this type of connection because as it tries to get filled, it only perpetuates the addiction cycle even more. What happens here is a toxic narcissistic person is looking for other people to validate and build them up. When in reality, that will always let that person down. Like, he will never be satisfied by another person because he's not willing to be honest about himself. So narcissists do this as well to be able to get validation for sure, but then also control. So like in interacting with other people, I wanted validation from them of who I was, of how I showed up. Like, I'm a good person, right? They'd validate that. Like, you love me, right? They'd validate that. All these different pieces that I would get validation from because it was something that I craved. But also it was control over that other person, controlling who they might be with, controlling how they might feel, controlling their interaction, controlling all these different pieces that I wanted to switch around as stories in my head saying that that control was actually love, that I cared about them. So that's why I was controlling them, that control was demonstrated in a loving way. Like, these emotional affairs offer this perfect aspect to manipulate and gaslight the other person. Like, for a narcissist, it's easier to gaslight someone in a long distance relationship or an emotional affair because they can go back and forth, making sure that they're emotionally invested and making sure that the person is only devoted to the narcissist's needs. Like, it locks them in. I don't have many videos that talk about the other woman in the affair. But that person typically gets overlooked, especially when that person has no clue who the narcissist is. Has no clue that the narcissist has a whole nother family. But he's been building this emotional affair over and over and over again. So there's this high level of connection that then oftentimes turns physical. But a lot of times people get confused with this because they're left on the hook and they're reeled back in over and over and over again, thinking like, oh, now he cares. Oh, now he doesn't. Some of the hardest people to break out of a trauma bond are ones that have never seen or never had a physical connection, but they're emotionally entrapped. Because then they're trying to reconcile the stories that they're telling themselves, and they never got to see what was actually demonstrated on the other side. Because the narcissist wasn't in their life to actually show them some of that toxicity. Maybe you're at the place where he's pumped you up, he's made you feel valuable, he's made you feel special, but he's been also manipulating you. Manipulating your emotions, guilt tripping you, maybe making you feel or believe that you're the cause of the unhappiness in his primary relationship, whether that's with you or whether that's with someone else. And it gains control over you, over your actions, over your decisions. Like, are you seeing this right now? Is this making sense? If it is, like, let me know. If it's not, like, put a question underneath the video because I want you to understand, like, hey, this is what's going on. And so when we talk through this aspect of emotional affairs, narcissists will use this to be able to get away from their own relationship. So like, he's in a relationship, he's cheating with you, and he's in this relationship, or he's cheating on you, whatever it might be. But he's in a relationship, but he's using this emotional intimacy with other people. This is one of the hardest pieces because you as the wife find out that your husband has had an emotional affair with other people. You're like, why didn't you come to me? And is one of the hardest things you're ever going to deal with because you see this person be more emotionally connected to other women than he is with you. Part of the reason with that is because with other women, he doesn't have to be truly himself. They don't have to live with him. He doesn't have to go home to them. So as a result, he can still be selfish and how he wants to be in this relationship, and he can look great in another relationship or an emotional affair because he's not actually showing them all of him. This is hard because you see it and you're like, but he's showing them more than what he's showing me. Because he's being selective about what he shows in order to connect with people to keep that emotional affair going. But it's hard because they appear more vulnerable with other people. They have deep emotional connection sometimes with someone else and not with you. The whole aspect is then they can be fake. They can show up a certain way to this other person because this other person doesn't actually know them. This emotional affair, it provides an escape from intimacy demands in the committed relationship. So they can maintain a superficial emotional connection without responsibilities of a committed relationship. This is the whole aspect of narcissist can have his cake and eat it too. Can be in a relationship, get what he wants in that physical aspect, be in a different relationship, gets what he wants in that emotional aspect. But when you try to combine those two things, they don't work because it takes honesty and vulnerability and true emotional connection. This is a hard part for you to reconcile because you're struggling with it, being like, I don't know what to believe. I don't know why I wasn't good enough. And you start to beat yourself up. I want you to take a moment and understand that that decision of him investing or him putting emotions or him building this affair with someone else, that decision had nothing to do with you. It didn't. That decision was his at the beginning and his even now. His choice to stop investing in your relationship and go to someone else that he didn't have to show up committed, that he didn't have to show up responsible, that he could do whatever he wanted in that regard so he can continue to feed himself. The void that he has inside that will never get filled because he's trying to fill it with other people. He's an addict to getting that supply. That's it. If you want help with this, would love to be able to help support you as you go through your journey. You can go to rawmotivations.com to be able to grab a one-on-one. We can talk, we can work through this, we can see where you are and how we can actually help you move forward. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, rate, review. If you're listening on the podcast, thanks so much, and we'll see you guys next time.